All right, Sid, hope you're doing well, man. Wanted to finally get this video over to you just to kind of compare your mechanics to Jacob deGrom's, who is a pitcher for the Texas Rangers. This was him when he was back with the New York Mets a few years ago. I want to get your mechanics right up next to his just so you could see his mechanics. And then from there, that way we can kind of go over what we talked about in the lesson, what are some things that we're going to keep working on, and that way we can kind of use this as a cornerstone for us for pitching. So I'm going to play these back to back, and then we'll go from there. All right, so first thing that I want to show, and I know this video doesn't really show it very well, I want to first start about kind of your approach, right? So we talked about you as an accelerator, and the reason that you're an accelerator is just like Jacob deGrom. As soon as you lift, your first movement is down, is towards the mound. So that makes you an accelerator by nature because you're using gravity as your source of power, right? The thing is we also have to build up that power. So the very first thing that we kind of worked on last time and that we'll continue to work on during lessons is this front leg here, right? Because as you're going to notice, you kind of go in an awkward position, right? And what we worked on our last lesson was because you're very, very comfortable with going out of the slide step. You actually feel like it helps you a lot, right? So we worked on trying to basically counterbalance it, right? To where what we were doing is, because you notice when you get here, you open up really, really wide, right? So what we were doing is we were trying to close yourself off. That way when you landed in perfect foot strike, right? Which is where Jacob deGrom is right now. Kind of like how we're hitting, where our foot's just a little, really for pitching, it's supposed to be kind of straight, but pitching, it's more inside, kind of pigeon-toed, if you will. So that was the big thing that we started out with our lesson, with just kind of talking about that, because you're going to notice, if you're looking at your mechanics real quick, okay, and then you look at Jacob deGrom's mechanics, you're going to notice the difference between your mechanics and Jacob deGrom's mechanics in the big setting is the chain, if you will, of, how does this make this all work, right? Because you're going to notice with him that he is really, really big on everything goes through. Everything stays connected, right? Where it kind of looks like with ours is kind of we're like, a little bit disconnected, right? Our glove is disconnected right here versus take a look at Jacob deGrom's glove real quick, right? Watch his hands. They work at the exact same time versus if we go up to our hands real quick, Sid, you notice like they kind of break differently, right? So one thing that we worked on is that. The other thing that we worked on, and one thing I actually really, really like, is I like how out front you get. This is great, Sid. This is fantastic, right? Because a lot of kids, when they first start, or rather a lot of athletes, let me correct myself, when they first start out with pitching, one of the biggest problems is their release, is they don't get out front. They want to stop themselves. So with you finishing out front really well already, that's something we can just build on. So we don't have to work on the finish at all. The finish will get itself there. Now we can work from start to the finish, right? So you do a really good job at that point. But like what we talked about with this glove, right? We talked about with here, we just kind of throw our glove to the side here, right? And the problem with that is that causes our body to go out to the left as well, right? Especially at your age right now, Sid, and just the experience that you've had with pitching, you're not able to control your body while going forward to give yourself a throwing lane, right? That's why if you look at like a Tim Lincecum, for example, way back in the day, I say way back in the day, and that was, the time when I was about your age. The thing about him and how his mechanics were was the way how he did his mechanics with his glove and his arm was to give him a throwing lane to throw, okay? So that is what you may see with some pitchers, is they're trying to give themselves a throwing lane. But the thing is they have so much control of their core, and they have a really, really strong core, and they're able to control their mechanics to make sure they're still going to home plate, that they're able to create that throwing lane, right? For us, we're not at that level yet. So we have to continue to keep this glove into our armpit like we talked about. That way we're able to still, number one, create that throwing lane for us, but number two, to keep all of our momentum going forward, right? Those are the really big two things, right? And additionally, with our finish, you do actually a really great job of bringing this leg up but we need to keep working on it. And this is something that we didn't talk about in the last lesson, but we'll talk about next pitching lesson, is going around, which is what you do, versus if you look at Jacob deGrom, it is up and over, right? So it's up and over, almost kind of like a catapult, right? So it's right here. This is our catapult. It's going up and over like that, right? Comparatively, what you're doing, if I clear everything out, is you're coming up and around, right? So we're not getting that final oomph out of our finish, right? We're not using physics to our advantage, right? And that's a big thing with pitching too, Sid, is using physics to our advantage in order to, like what we talked about in our lesson, to generate maximum output, okay? So those are the big things that we talked about. You know, obviously, I don't want to go into too much depth in this video. I want it to be a really good video to where we kind of point out your mechanics. You know, with our arm, you know, the big thing with our arm is take a look at where our arm is right now. If you notice, above our, or rather below our shoulder, right? We talked about with that bear position where we want to be above our shoulder just because of arm health, number one, but also for efficiency out of our arm, right? So there's a couple things that, you know, just in this video, I kind of wanted to talk about so that you got to see it, kind of the things that we're talking about from an outside perspective, as if you were looking at yourself from my shoes. That way you're able to always reference this video, just going back to, you know, when you're in those moments where you may not understand your mechanics, or there's something you want to see in your mechanics, that you can always come back to this video to see that. So I hope this video helps, Sid, and I will see you next time.